55 seconds. Instantly. Baldwin states the sanctions of the actual event denial of economic relations by one or more states intended to influence behavior of another state or non-economic issues or to limit its military capability. The verdict is negative to show that economic sanctions are on balance effective in relation to other forms of statecraft. This is consistent with the text of the resolution, given that it questions the end results of economic sanctions per the phrase to achieve foreign policy objectives. Effectiveness not merely need to be statistical, but relative to the effectiveness of other actions. The assessment of sanctions as leading to effective governance must be relative to other available foreign policy options. Baldwin writes, policy making involves making decisions, and decision making involves choosing among alternative courses of action. The advantage and disadvantage of various policy options requires significance primarily by comparison with the other options. The failure to use sanctions can result in letting bad options off the hook, making a country look weak on the global stage, or can lead to the overuse or abuse of war as a foreign policy instrument. I value the Altamont foreign policy standards maximizing effective governance. Jennings writes, uneffective governance is one that maximizes the economic prosperity of its own people, protects their security, and serves the rule of law both domestically and internationally. Effective governance is more likely to lead towards a stable international society by promoting peace through the rule of law. First, international instability creates more violence, which is unacceptable under any ethical framework of applying international law to other nations. It's desirable even under a realist perspective since it prevents the likelihood of terrorist groups rising. Second, international stability is a prerequisite to any sort of international discourse occurring. The only way we can identify ourselves in relation to the world is to have a stable environment. If the world is shifting, our environment sees where there's violence, stability is impossible for one to create a narrative construction of identity space. International stability prerequisite to moral discourse is very existent. Third, effective governments by the social contract where they maintain the security of the population thus to create the environment where economic prosperity may flourish. Governments have contractual obligation with their citizens when they seek to protect their rights and in return are given authority by the people. Fourth, along with the social contract, effective governments abide by the international laws in order, for example, agreeing with the UN Charter, international treaties, treaty compliance necessary to create a more stable international society where nations can compromise without resorting to arms. Condition one is that sanctions are not only an effective governance alternative to inaction, more and other forms of diplomacy, but they're becoming increasingly effective. This is Collins. Economic sanctions in the unipolar era have demonstrated to be highly effective. The success rate of sanctions has experienced an inversion in the unipolar era, with 2/3 of all sanctions episodes and successes. The principal miscalculation of sanctions efficacy critics is the failure to adequately consider the influence of international structure on sanctions effectiveness. The emergence of the unipolar system in the closing decade of the 20th century greatly amplified the potency of U.S. sanctions efforts, primarily as a result of the marked decline of offsetting assistance provided by rival states. That erosion of counterbalancing activities substantially increased the success rate of sanctions campaigns initiated by the U.S. Sanctions have become a highly functional instrument of statecraft succeeding in the large majority of cases. And Baldwin too explains, if another state violates international law or refuses to respond to incentives or diplomacy in wars, an unrealistic or inappropriate response to sanctions can often provide the only realistic course of action for the opportunity to influence behavior. Moreover, sanctions have become more effective at reducing humanitarian consequences. Weiss, UNICEF, the UN High Commissioner for Refugees, the World Health Organization, and the World Food Program are now in place to warn against negative consequences of sanctions, so that innocents don't pay unnecessarily high costs. Condition two is that without the occasional imposition of sanctions, the threat of sanctions becomes meaningless. This is Dresner. The data shows that more than 80% of the observations the United States threatened to impose economic sanctions. Success rate was considerably higher for the sanctions that ended the threat stage, 56%. The trend supports the selection effects argument. The results show that sanctions used in support of regulatory goals and even stronger support for selection effects arguments. In more than 75% of the cases, the United States terminated the dispute at the threat stage. The cases were successful more than half the time. And Griffith and Barnes provide empirical proof. The threat of sanctions may be influential in deterring the egregious and escalatory behavior. In some cases, they sufficiently weaken parties' strategic, military, economic, or diplomatic positions so that they can recognize that they have more to gain by entering the process by shooting at a scene in Sudan and the Tuteja war. And to maintain the credibility of their threat, senators must impose a sanction. Thus, threats are negative ground. This is Morgan. A sanctions episode assumed to begin when the senators makes a threat about the possibility of sanctions or impose a sanction with no previous threat. A threatening not being specific must only declare a sanction or a possibility against the target. AC. Starting with the definition of use, he says use means to act with. You can classify my definition of an economic sanction. I'm showing that the threat of sanctions meet this. I say you prefer this empirically because I'm giving you the Morgan study, which specifically explains that when a sanctions episode is starting, it starts with the threat of sanctions. That's how they're used empirically. Then go to the burden. He says I need to prove the converse, but he's looking at it in some sort of moral sense. I would say that you have to evaluate the amount in some sort of sense of like honest desirability, because that's what the resolution is talking about, like foreign policy of a particular nation, not about morality. Then go to his first argument about rationality. I would say that people would choose an ends-based system because there's a greater chance that their own interests would be maximized. So I'm leaning into this rationality framework, which he said I could do. But second of all, he says he reads the con analysis. But one, I would say that ends-based systems mean rationality. I think like governments are rational actors who always have to calculate like ends-based. Governments can't act deontologically, or else like we have maxims like not to kill, but we couldn't apply that to someone in the military. And second of all, I say that you have to be alive to have any sort of valuation. So rationally, you would choose like a system that would keep you alive. Then go to his argument, well, you can't aggregate. I'm not trying to link you to some sort of body count impact. I'm just talking about like an ends-based effective government. So that doesn't spike out against my position. And his third argument is that positive obligations are infinitely regressive, but deontology cannot prescribe an action for every single case. I.e., like there are cases when obligations conflict and you don't know what to do in deontology because you're always going to violate someone's word. Then go to his first argument about how rationality enables us to be different than animals. One, I would say you can classify the argument that you have to be alive to have any sort of value. And then go to the Altamont card. Deontology is not applicable to state action. For example, the Altamont card is using words like you and I, but that is different because the state is a unified actor. He's not reading arguments that the state is supposed to be accountable for like every single the will of the people. Then go to the Iraq example. One, this is his body count impact, but there are other factors in Iraq had just got done fighting the Persian Gulf War and the North Korean argument, and there's no way he can actually every single day over and say that 1 million deaths were actually caused